Fantastic. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again. Thank you for your patience. I very much rather be with you, but there you have it. Also, I apologize in advance because I need to be a bit quick, unfortunately, but I'm sure you already had enough of me yesterday. So this is an afterthought on, I'm afraid, a quite different matter. So if you can go one slide on, I am going to show you my 4 points. The title is Seaports, and I just want to very briefly go through a few thoughts I had on ports, particularly as far as national and Eurocentrism is concerned. And trying to share my thoughts on their efficiency and sustainability. So I'm going to go through 4 points. You'll recognize the structure. I'm going to talk about the commercial playground of ports. I'm going to then look at the content of carriage of goods by sea and why efficiency is so important in contractual terms. I am then going to look quickly at the DALI, because I think that gives us a good example of efficiency and sustainability, or the lack thereof, or the consequences thereon of marine accidents. And then I'll draw a few conclusions. So if Eva, you could move the slides along, that would probably help a little bit.
More?
I can see always the same slide.
Why?
Okay.
Because I have Seaports, point 1 now, Seaports and their commercial
No, I still see the title one. If you turn the camera, I'm going to see your screen. So that's fine.
Okay, sure.
Wow, this is technology. Mass is nothing if you compare with this. Fantastic.
Maybe
so, I think
Roberts.
You need to go back a little bit. Sorry.
Okay.
One back. Yes, there it is. Okay. The commercial back playground of ports, I don't need to tell you, but maybe some of the students need to hear this, won't be surprised to hear, is business, commodities, goods moving around the world. This is the only reason why, and I just echo what I said about masts and ships. I'm afraid this is also true for ports. There is no other reason for the existence of ports. And actually with port, and I did a couple of studies on this, is even deeper than with ships, because it's not just the port itself, but it is the city. And over the hundreds of years and thousands of years, also civilizations developed around seaports and around trade. So it is a crucial player in the world of international trade. So we need, well, we've seen that in Dubrovnik as well. But there are places like Singapore, for example, where if there was no port, there would be very little indeed. So it's all about international trade. And when we look at the sustainability of ports, then I'm afraid we need to think about the palatability of these ports to the international trade industry, perhaps even more than the shipping industry itself. So if you move on, one slide, thank you, is the one with the first little graph, the first chart. Excellent. You could see, I'm afraid I just missed Dubrovnik in this map, but you could see the northern Adriatic. Okay, you could see the ports which, in the common understanding of the word competition, are competing between themselves. You see Venice, you see Trieste, you see Koper, Rijeka, Ravenna. This is the place I was born and raised, and this is the place where I now went back to live. I have seen the development of these ports, or the non-development of some of these ports, depending on policies, and it is painful to watch sometimes. But this is what traditionally competition for customers, for investors, for integration with the local communities, so for coming together, port and port services, and people working for port services, and people living with people working for port services. So the community which revolves around ports is a community which must be attracted from one port to another. And that's the traditional view of competition. As we started to study it when I was a kid, is very much localized. But also, more recently, there's another element of competition, which is the connectivity with extra-European network of or sources of work, sources of materials, sources of trade. And in particular, another one I was involved with is the Belt and Road Project, where we did quite a lot of work on that one, and which is, as I'm sure you know, is what used to be called the new Silk Road, which attaches basically Europe to China and the countries, some of the countries around China. But if you now shift a little bit in the future, if you start thinking the way we should be thinking already, should have been thinking already for a few decades, the competition in reality today is a lot broader than that. Because if you look at ports from the sea, you will find that going to Trieste, going to Rijeka, going to Dubrovnik, going to Venice, going to Ravenna makes no difference at all in terms of route planning. So as far as the ships are concerned, if you are trying to attract a ship to a port, then the competition between these places isn't really the competition we should be worried about. Today, we're talking when goods come to Europe, the competition is usually a lot bigger than that. We could go to the Venice, Trieste, Rijeka triangle, but we could go to the Genoa triangle as well. We could go to the Brindisi area. There's a very large container dry port there. But by the same token, if we have containers to be carried to Vienna, to be carried to Berlin, we could go again to Trieste or indeed to Hamburg, because it makes no difference in terms of railroad distance to go south or to go north. So you may, if you come from the Atlantic Ocean, decide to go north or south, Genoa, Hamburg, Rotterdam, and it makes no difference. Now, again, this is competition for the same things: customers, investors, integration with local communities, and connectivity with the Silk Road or other routes, land routes, which would take trade. But there's one thing which going to China taught me, is that Eurocentrism perhaps is a little bit overrated. If you move on one more, sorry, when you click, you have, this is the European map I think I told you about. And if you click again, there is a map of the world as it is seen from the Far East. Now, if you look at this map, this, to most of us, will look highly unfamiliar. In fact, if you look at it, it takes a little bit of time to understand where you are. You've got Africa on the Far East, and you got South America. You have Africa on the far west, you got South America on the Far East. This is the way some people have maps in their elementary school, simply because in every country you go, you find that your country is at the center of the world. And if that is the case, it means that the real competition, the real people we are competing for more customer, more international investor, more efficiency, and more sustainability, isn't just local, it is global. While it was true that in the 1980s and 1990s, the center of the commercial world, the potential for new buyers, the potential for the expansion of markets was Europe and the United States, it is now true to say that probably those markets are mostly saturated, and there are markets which are a lot more interesting in the Far East, India, China, and countries which once upon a time were not as interesting and now become very interesting. And we need to switch the attention to this part of the world. And this I'm talking to the EU students and researchers more than the others. Because while the others from the Far East have always worked very hard to learn what we were doing, we haven't done the same. And I'm afraid we are lagging behind. And if you look at ports, and this map is very nice, I really like this one, not just because it shows that the world is not Eurocentric, but also because it shows where the really big, important, competitive, and in many, many ways efficient ports are now located. Sometimes when I go to the European Commission and I hear, that, Europe has to do this, Europe has to do that, Europe is the best, we need to set the scene, we need to set the high standards for the rest of the world. But the reality is that a lot of the ship owners, a lot of the traders are not really looking into the EU. So even if we excluded some of the ships, even if we excluded some of the market, I'm afraid people wouldn't cry that loud as they would have 20, 25 years ago. Now, I really need to accelerate. Can you move on, please? One slide. And then if you touch again, you will see lovely charter parties of the old style coming up to see that these are, if you click again, and then you click again, the lovely pieces of paper. I love these ones. These are old charter parties which have been here for a very, very long time. Some of these date from the early 19th and 20th century. So it's very nice. Move on. Now, context of the carriage of goods by sea. Why ports are important? Charter parties, bills of lading, seaway bills, ships delivery orders. Why the efficiency? Why the fact that the port is efficient, dynamic, and well-equipped matters? Charter parties, look at safe port warranties, ballast water management clauses, lay time and the marriage clauses. Safe port warranties, for example, and I'll just use that as an example, they contain details about the safety of where the vessel reaches the port, the safety of the port as it should be. Now, safety comes into play at a specific moment in time when we look at English law, so a prospective safety. So it's a dynamic concept. But in my experience, once there is an issue with the safety of a port, then there is a quite significant consequence on chartering vessels going to the same port. There is a very bad effect of the reputation of the port on the attractiveness that that port has, not just for the ship owners, where, which you would think, well, the ship owner wants to have a safe place to go, and therefore, if the place is not safe, they don't want to go, or they will increase freight to go to that place. But also for the charterers, our traders. Why? Because the last thing you want, if you are a charterer or trader, is to be involved in an accident. Another thing I wanted to show you is another concept, another idea, is about the Ballast Water Management Convention 2004, and some of you will be very, very familiar with this. Now, it's the B2 standard has just been implemented. Should have come into full implementation on the 8th of September this year. And it talks about the reception facilities, on the way that the ballast water should be managed to avoid cross-contamination with invasive species. Again, the convention talks about equipment which can or should be installed on board vessels and can or should be installed ashore. And if the vessel doesn't have the equipment on board, they can rely on shore equipment. But shore equipment does, I'm afraid, require investment, sometimes heavy investment, and therefore, again, to be at the forefront of efficiency, even in this case, does attract quite a lot of business. This is based on my experience, on discussions which have actually taken place. Now, if you scroll on, you will find some examples of laytime and the marriage clauses, which are quite nice to read, not just because I have put them in white, and I'll just go for this one. Any delay to vessel after the expiration of 6 hours from charterer's receipt of a valid notice of readiness before arrival in berth, or any delay to vessel arrival in berth due to unavailability of berth or solely for terminal purposes, shall count as lay time, or if the vessel is on the marriage, as time on the marriage. In this case, the charterer pays for a delay which is caused by some sort of inefficiency of the port. If the berth is not available, if the berth is not available for terminal purposes only, then something is not working as efficiently as it should. If you move on, and there's another much longer clause coming from one of the tanker charter parties, where there are port authority intervention, local law, regulation, Coast Guard, everything, all of these exceptions to the running of lay time. These are all connected with some sort of administrative activity which happens in the port, which makes the port less quick, if you like, than it should be. And again, in this case, the ship owner pays. Now, it doesn't really matter who pays, guys. The important point we have to make here is that ship owner and charterers are the business of the port. And the inefficiency of the port costs money to its clients and makes the port less attractive. Now, if you move on again, just a few words about the speed at which bills of lading are issued. That is something which is regarded as very important. This is something which we have been working upon for many years with electronic bills of lading and stuff like that, with whether my good friend Ridian likes it or not, I'm afraid it is now reality, at least under English law, because of a very recent act, which I'm sure you have already discussed earlier today. But also customs has a big role in that, because the quicker the customs pieces of paper are processed, well, the quicker the vessel can leave, the quicker the documents can be sent to the banks, the quicker the money can be gotten out of the bank, and the quicker we can make traders happy. When the traders got the bank, they pay their charter party hire or freight, and everybody is happy. Freight is higher than port fees, but the price of the commodity is a lot higher than freight and port fees combined. When we move at the other side, at the other end, when the port is a discharge port, again, quick release of cargo is the key. And you won't be surprised that our friends in China had already developed 5 years ago, automated release systems based on the same software which operates WeChat, which is the Chinese version of WhatsApp. So basically, you get a code on your phone, you click on a kind of a camera, and there is a machine which takes the container all the way to the gate. with no men involved. And again, that is not because it is cheaper, because I think it is more expensive than having a truck, but because it is more efficient, certainly in terms of time. Now, if you click again, you find two very old and one very new bill of lading, just because we love these pieces. And then there is a video which, for the love of God, don't click, because this will just stop the entire presentation for running and probably destroy your computer. So just look at the picture. But the idea was to show you a picture of something.
Oh, I did it.
Do not. You did it.
Yeah, I did it.
Okay, well, okay. Well, it doesn't work on my machine, so good to see. So look, everything went wrong there. We still don't know. Maybe some of you know more than I do. Nothing in the public domain is certain yet what went wrong. But let's focus not on the ship, not on the fact that it's not a drone, it's not a mass, not on the human error, which surely will be involved somehow and somebody will be blamed for this. But look at the port. This accident, okay, has caused havoc in the port where it has happened. And this means, okay, that the trade has been interrupted, and it has been interrupted for a long time. It was very tricky to put things back together. There's a very important bridge which is now not there. So not just international trade has been interrupted, but also the movement of people, the same people who live in that city, because the port is the essential heart of that city. So this accident has not just damaged the ship and the port, but it has damaged the port community, which plays a huge role into the efficient dynamics of a port. Now, if you move on one slide, this cost at the time of the March circular at the end of March, early April last year, was estimated to be $3.1 billion. The entire reserve for the P&I Club this year. And it was very early in the year. So this is a huge cost for the entire shipping community. Do not be fooled. P&I clubs are insurers, but we all pay for that. We all pay because we all contribute. The entire shipping sector is sharing the risk in a very indirect way, but we all pay for this. Now, what does this accident? Now, we don't know what happened. Might have been the vessel. It might have been the fact that there were no tugs. I'm sure you might have noticed that this vessel had no tugs in assistant or in standby, which I found absolutely astonishing. But so it is. Something went wrong. We don't know what it is. But what does this do for the competitiveness, for customers, for investors? Are you sure you really want to invest in a place which has got such a high and negative press coverage? What about the integration with the local community? How many people did moan the human loss here? How many people was affected because they couldn't go wherever they wanted to go because the city was in a very difficult situation, facing a very difficult situation? Is this efficient? Is this sustainable? These are my questions. I would have spoken a lot longer on this, so it's a shame. But there we go. So my conclusions, because the last slide, are the following. So the theme I was asked to discuss was efficiency, sustainability, ports. Now, there is a network, very close network. It's like a soul being between the port, the international trade community, ships, but also the local community living and working around the port. In order to have a port which is competitive and sustainable, it has to be safe in every possible way. It has to be responsive not just to casualty. We are always responsive to casualty. We need to be responsive to the evolution of shipping, to the evolution of technologies. We have to be efficiently creating and accompanying the port towards the future. It is absolutely crucial because those who did it, and again, I'm sorry to give the same examples all the time, but Hong Kong, Singapore, but also Rotterdam did fantastically at this, to just go for the new technology, go for innovation, and just try to be at the forefront, even at the port side. And I'll just leave you with this sentence, which I have drafted myself. I haven't copied it yet, so it's my copyright. The future is bright, this has been said before, for safe, efficient, cost-effective, and technologically advanced multimodal hubs who know how to keep not just ships happy, but to keep the entire shipping community they serve, and service is the key word, happy. Once again, thank you very much for your kind attention and for your patience. And I hope next year I'm going to stay at least another day so I can give you my second presentation with a lot more oomph than this one. Thank you very much. And thank you, Igor. And thank you, Susanna.